Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm Andrew Stuck. I'm one of the co-producers of Walk, Listen, Create. This is a celebration of the Marŝarto Award. As you all know, you're fluent in Esperanto. It's Marŝarto is Esperanto for wandering art. So there you go. Next time you're in the pub quiz or trying to impress someone, you can start spouting Esperanto at them. The good news is we've got the winner of last year's award, which is Tamsin, and we have the honourable mention, who is Marie-Anne.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here with you all. I am a walking artist based in Edinburgh, and I am going to tell you about my project, Walking Like a Tortoise, tonight. So this is my project, Walking Like a Tortoise, boundary walking, and it was entirely located in a small part of city of Edinburgh, which is itself on the edge of the North Sea, and particularly the estuary of the Firth of Forth, which is where I live. I look across that water to the Kingdom of Fife, and I started doing walking as part of the Festival of Terminalia. Anyway, it says a multi-layered project, in case you can't see it. And so these are the things I'm going to talk about this evening, about slow walking and maps and workshops with different people of different ages, and a couple of exhibitions that were part of the project. The geography of the area, you can see the harbour of Granton down there with its arms, which I like to think of as a nice big hug. We're an international area, multicultural area that welcomes incomers, portraits, community walking, and local history. So this is a shot of my taken at the first exhibition. So as I say, my walking around the boundary of where I live began as a one-off walk as part of the Festival of Terminalia, Roman god of edges and boundaries, and I wanted to start making some work where I was rather than traveling all the time. Some of you might know had been doing a lot of traveling, and so I thought, well, before I do anything else, I need to know where the outside limit of where I live is. So that was that. And I was asking, where's the edge of here? And lo and behold, I discovered that nobody agreed where the edge was. And it took me on this big, long journey of researching and looking for where was the agreed boundary of this area. So it's involved lots of relationships. It involved relationships with people who came to my exhibition and told stories and recognized people who had their portraits in the exhibitions as people who they live alongside, people of many different nationalities. And I had a cabinet of curiosities, which I stole the idea from somebody else, as part of the exhibition, and this family were particularly brilliant at making up. They chose objects from the cabinet and made up their own stories, and so the father wrote it down, and the children made up the stories, and yeah, it was lovely to hear them do that. And slow walking. So just to give you a background to the title. I am a shiatsu practitioner, and my elderly neighbour, a good few years ago now, was having problems with her back, and I went next door and to give her some massage to see if I could help her feel a bit more comfortable. And while I was massaging her, she told me about the tortoise, and we live at the top of a hill, as I say, overlooking that harbour. And she told me that when she was a little girl, she's lived in that house her whole life, and she's died now. She used to run down the hill to when they saw a big ship arriving, and the ships were bringing esparto grass in from the south of Spain and from North America. And the whole of the holds of the ship were full of grass. She described it to me. And the middle pier of these three arms of our harbour had a hole in it, and the boats used to sail underneath, and then they used to unload the bales of grass up and through this hole. And she said that she and the other children made a ring around the space and watched. And she told me in great detail how they didn't know what language the men who were unloading were speaking. So she created this sort of lovely story of intrigue for me. And stowed away in the hulls of the boats were tortoises, which had been put there by mistake when they were collecting grass. And when they came across a tortoise, they would lift it up. And she showed me how it happened, and she showed me her face. It was lovely to hear the story. And they gave them to the children. And she said, and I took it and I ran up the hill and I said, Granny, Granny, look, I've got a tortoise. And so I was very taken by that story a long time before I started doing this project. But when I started the project for proper, I discovered other people would tell me the same story. So it was, well, obviously there was other children there who were getting tortoises, and the grass was coming in for the paper making industry that was being made along the rivers. And so, so we had an international harbour even back then. And so that type of storytelling and being very slow in my walking. I'm an extremely slow walker because I stop all the time and look at what I'm passing and try to understand the juxtaposition between buildings and wasteland and this very, very varied geography of the area where I live, and the stories that people told me when I stopped and talked to people was a real joy because of the community building that was happening. And I started feeling more and more as an incomer myself, as a white middle-aged English woman arriving in Scotland years ago when I didn't even know Scotland was a separate country. Suddenly I was starting to feel part of a community and a deep connection to place. So I asked, where does Granton begin and end? And I looked at lots of maps, and I went to the National Library of Scotland, which has the most marvellous collection of very old maps. The name of Granton goes back to the 15th century. Another nice story called the Rough Wooing, when the English attacked what they thought was Leith, which is in fact 2 harbours down from where we are. So they overshot and ransacked a castle in those days, and it was the English trying to take over the Scottish because Mary Queen of Scots was making an alliance with the French, hence the Old Alliance. So I looked at old maps, and then I looked at political boundaries, and I looked at community boundaries, and I looked at the community council boundary, and everybody had a different definition of where Granton began and ended. So I made my own map, and I had to make sure that the beings that I met when I was on my walks, not just the humans, were represented on that map, as you can see. And so everything I do, my sense of landscape, my sense of place is everything that I meet in those landscapes, rather than just the people. And I find that I don't have to explain that to the people I walk with there, because they're all conscious of it too. So that's been another amazing point of contact between us. And what happened in the end was that so I had this exhibition at this place called Granton Hub, which is our local community centre, which doesn't have any funding really to speak of at all. It's a city council owned building. And while I was showing my work there, which once a month they give a free space to a local artist, they told me that the job which I'd applied for and not got, but which I'd interviewed for to be the community worker, the community history worker, had come free again. And so I said, oh, well, I'm still free. And a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call, and so I got to work with the History Hub, the local History Hub, and that is an amazing archive of maps, but lots and lots of old photographs, and more importantly, people who've been both grown up in the area, but also absolutely steeped in their own local history. And there's something very special about the local history in this area. And it was actually a very, very difficult project, because they didn't really understand community arts. In fact, the people who were hiring me, and so, for example, I knew that I needed to be there every Tuesday with the door open so that people started to trust the fact that I was there, and they would come, and they did do that, come and tell me stories of the jobs that they'd had in the industries that were there before they got knocked down, for example. So eventually the project got taken over by Granton Waterfront, and that was because they asked me to tell the Lottery Heritage Fund about what I was doing, because they were trying to get funding from them. And they said, if you carry on doing what she's doing, we'll give you the money. And so they employed me, which was very nice. So when my contract came to an end with the History Hub, I was able to carry on the work, doing workshops. So with these little children that you can see from all different nationalities and backgrounds, very often they're families that move in temporarily and move out when they can. Older people, groups of carers, a really wide range of school children during the holidays, adults. So it was lots of workshops, which was lovely, and it meant that they were speaking to each other while they were drawing or collaging or working with clay, or then I was able to overhear these lovely stories. And then I had a second exhibition at the Edinburgh Central Library, which was nice, and I was able to show is a sort of version of a sound walk that was shortlisted for Sound Walk September, that is on one of the arms of the harbour that I was showing the photograph of earlier. And so I sprayed the Forth Road Bridge, this iconic structure, because the wall is so tall you can't see over it. Not just me being so small, but nobody can see over it. So I sort of play with words about what's on the other side of the wall, and the fact that you would now be trespassing if you were on that wall. And that's the Cabinet of Curiosities that I was talking about earlier, things which I found in the landscape and later returned, some of which are sort of intrinsically part of the industries that were there. So there's that photograph again of the harbour there with its walls. This is where those ships used to come in. And some of the work that I made, this one's called Body Walking. It was, so that's me, which I stitched onto this long piece of silk, and overstitched over the top the map of Granton. So here's the harbour here, like that. And also the map of my home, where I was born, and the journey up to Scotland and so on. So, and it was a long piece of white silk, which I was given at the Gurdwara in Glasgow when I walked at the end of the COP26 pilgrimage. And this is an example of some of the people I met around the boundary, who kindly allowed me to take their photographs and told me their stories. And you can see that two of the people that I had, two of the children that I had a photograph before I met Suhita here, their parents gave me permission, and they wanted to be photographed. Ran into the photograph, and I didn't realize that until after this was printed. And some of the people I spoke to are very unhappy about being there. There was a woman from Ukraine who was desperate to go home. I don't know whether she's ever got home yet. Whereas Suhita was really happy to be here, and very happy that we have some very welcoming organizations like our local library, which provides storytelling and warm places for her to go with her baby and feed her baby. So a whole mixture of stories which I was privileged to hear. And these are some of the other personal histories that I maybe don't have a conversation with. There's a butterfly here on the middle of this bindweed, but some of the other inhabitants of the area. And then I went on lots of walks, and there was already a local history walk that had been made for the area, but I realized that there were lots of groups in the community that were not able to participate. So I managed to persuade them to let me pay to have them translated into into Polish and into Arabic. And before that, I did lots of research into who the communities were in our area and who lived there, and tried to choose languages that maybe other groups were the widest groups possible. And then managed to find women from each of those communities who were really keen on walking, and who so I was able to do their English version, and they were speaking their language to the people from their community who came. And this is a sort of one of our iconic old buildings, the gas tower, which has now been painted bright blue. So community walking is very important, and that's where I was again hearing stories that people were telling about how they made lists, for example, of local flora and fauna that is being erased from our area because of the new building, or stories about how important the trees are, and again what it felt like to wake up one morning and see them all be cut down. So there's this enormous change happening in the area, and these walks enable us to share these stories and our feelings about it, and how disorientating it is, especially for the older people who have lived in the area for generations, and how difficult they find the fact that the council have renamed streets and changed the name of one building to give it the name of another building, which so they don't know where they are. You know, they literally struggle to orientate themselves in their own home area. So really all about place and listening. So local history, this is the same building. So this what used to be called the gas station, railway station. You can just see where the platform used to be. And up here is where this walkway used to be over what is now a busy road, which has been renamed. And it's now been rather gentrified. And luckily I was able to organise some event, and a big event about a multicultural women's event in the building, which meant I got to know the people who sat on reception. So now when I take walking groups around, they let me in so that I can show the people who I'm walking with the inside of it, which has been left with the sort of the original walls and so on. I'm sure I must be going over time, so I'll very quickly, this is the last slide, just show you. Have I got time, Richard, just show this? Andrew, have I got time to show this? It's a few minutes long.
Yeah, sure, I think so. Marie-Anne, you're happy for this to go ahead, yeah? Yeah, go for it.
Are you sure? It doesn't matter. This is a film I made, which was shown in one of the exhibitions, and there's the boundary. Just say if you're not hearing. Oh, and right in the middle is a bit of sound, which might shock you, so just be prepared for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was great. Do you want to take some questions, or do people want to ask questions before we go on to Marie-Anne, or do we want to have Marie-Anne do her little presentation and we ask questions and get a discussion going after both of them? What do you think?
I would say some questions, perhaps. I have a question, like, what is this project ongoing for you? And like, what is now the, so when did it start? So long, how long have you been, was this whole thing, or is it still ongoing? Let's say.
So the whole thing was a year, and I got a little bit of funding at the end to do the final exhibition and workshops. It's ongoing in as much as that's where I live, and I'm still interested in exploring I still find that that's where I mostly walk, and so my current project is about finding the Granton burn, which is one side of the boundary, and it's an underground river. There's only a tiny bit of it, which I discovered when I was walking, that's actually above ground. So I'm continuing it, but just in my own time, as they say, under my own steam.
Can I ask another question? Like, all the stories you heard, how did you did you register them, or did you, I don't know, is there also the idea to bring it to something printed, or I don't know?
So in the exhibition, I had portraits of some of the people that I met, and underneath each portrait, there was some sentences which they gave me permission. So I asked the same questions of each person I met, and so so the answers they give, you know, and each of the exhibits, if you like, are the answers to the same questions. And of course, the more people I met, the more that informed how the project developed. I was able to, for example, when I had the walk translated into Arabic, it was as a result of meeting people who told me that, you know, they didn't speak enough English to understand the tour, for example. So it was woven in that respect. Those were a couple of ways that those stories were being told, were being used. Thank you.
I want to ask, that was lovely, thank you, Tamsin. How do you feel your relationship with the place changed through the project? Do you feel more connected to where you live?
Yes, enormously more, much more, yes. I mean, partly on a practical level, that now if I go out, I know people and they know me, which of course is lovely, just to be able to greet people as you walk along the street. And yes, I feel, I mean, as Dee will, I'm sure, agree, nobody English is ever going to belong to Scotland. So I belong. I feel that I belong as much as I could, having been in Scotland nearly 40 years. But you know, I have an accent. I'm quite clearly not from there. So but yeah, I do feel that I belong, and can now, I don't know, walk to the local. We have a local community garden which grows wheat, which they use for loaves, and I can go and stand in the queue on a Saturday morning and buy my bread and chat to people who I've met in the project and who I live alongside, and I'm still keeping on making work for the spaces, that trying to raise awareness of wasteland spaces, for example, and the rewilding that goes on before they come back and dig a great big hole and then leave it for another year. So yes, I'm constantly feeling that this is my place now. Thanks, Ali.
I think you belong, Tamsin. I think we can all belong. You know, people come from everywhere.
Thank you.
You know, like, I'm born in Scotland, but my dad was born in Scotland, but his dad was born in England, and my mum was born in Wales. And you know, I've been reading Doreen Massey again recently. I just love that idea of like place being much more open than that. I wanted to ask about what remains and what happens to what remains, because it looked like you made some lovely other outputs in the film, and the translated walks, which are just really brilliant and beautiful, and the exhibition and the curiosity cabinet. What happens to all this work and the remains of it, and where does it go as objects of arts practice, I guess?
Yes, I don't know. Most of it's in my room, in my studio. Well, my spare room, really. I call it my studio. The fund. I don't have any more funding, so I don't have a sort of ready-made role in the community. There's a group that I met that I sort of became involved with through using the same space, and they occasionally pay me to take walks, and they're doing a really interesting project. They're based at the Edinburgh Art College, and they are related to universities in Madrid and Paris who are looking, it's called Cultural Heritage at the Edge. So they're looking at these questions of heritage and what to keep and what not to keep. And as a result of that, I've been asked to do a lecture for the Scottish Buildings Heritage Group in November. So I'm doing my Granton burn discovery. I've been walking from a hill to the sea in the spirit of Patrick Geddes to which is their brief, in order to make a new map and to show them that in that lecture. So it continues a little bit, but as I'm sure lots of you know, not really being paid for anything. I just do it anyway. Otherwise, I don't know what will happen. The tours exist, and I think I've been hoping that somebody would be able to. I think I'll have to put in a separate funding bid to try and continue the tours, because then the centre that they technically belong to, i.e. where the funding came from, they're not doing them. I'm very disappointed they've gone back to doing the railways tour that they did before with the same person, which is very interesting, but it's not quite as broad as that. So yes, that's something I was thinking that maybe I could. But you know what it's like. All the funding is drying up, especially local council funding. But
I mean,
yeah.
I wonder. I mean, that's just maybe a different discussion, but I wonder, like looking at Paths for All and things like that, have little pots of funding for walking community work. Do you know, like health and well-being. I think Paths for All have a fund, for example.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yes, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, so in a minute we'll go to Marie-Anne. But I want to I had a quick question or a quick thought, really, is that you were talking about a local history centre. What I found is that when I've worked with sort of kind of local history centres, they like written material or drawn material, and they can cope with that. But when you do something which is more performative or more audio or whatever, they don't get it. And what I found then was that when I spoke to oral historians, ones who, do record the spoken word, they felt that what I was doing was too ephemeral. It wasn't, because oral historians tend to want sort of like a lifelong interview from someone, so that they sort of want to spend 3 hours interviewing someone. And I'm trying to do a walk where I'm, involving maybe 3 or 4 people in 90 minutes. It's sort of, they don't like that. So I found that my experience of doing similar kind of, I did nothing like as comprehensive as you, Tamsin, but, in a sort of shallower level, I found that, it's really difficult to engage with that kind of local history and get your stuff retained by them, because they just don't get it. Did you I don't know whether you've come across that.
Well, yes, and there's the basic practicality of when you're leading a walk, you can't really document at all. I mean, I had to rush home and write notes, as much as I could remember from what people had told me. But I couldn't even really do a basic photograph, partly because not everybody likes to have their photographs taken, especially from, say, the Arabic community. They don't want to, they don't want to have their photographs taken. But, there was, I didn't have anybody there to document. So you're right, it's been sort of lost, other than just trusting that experience was good for the people who were there, and and for myself, and that I will carry it through in my understanding and share it with people like yourselves. But I agree. I mean, because I was sitting in that history hub and because I was in charge of the catalogue while I was there, I recorded these conversations that these people had. I mean, I had just amazing, conversations with people who, so one man came in and said, I started working in this building when I was 16 when I left school, and I'm retiring next year. And all they did was move across the road, and he told me that the wire making machines used to cover the whole building's ground floor, and now they sit on a table, they have multiple ones. And so I just recorded it on my phone and uploaded it onto the catalogue, and I just try and tell everybody who will listen, those recordings are there, and those men are not going to be there for very long. Those people are not going to be there for very long because they're towards the end of their own lives. So yeah, but I agree, it's very difficult to, I think that work you've been doing about how to document, that you've been doing with the hubs about documentation is really important with walking, because you can't be with people with your feet on the ground and document at the same time. Well, I can't anyway. Really good point. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody.
Okay, Marie-Anne, it's your turn.
Okay, so welcome, Marie-Anne. It's really lovely to see some familiar faces, and I will talk about my project sweat mapping. Then some of the people here are even part of it, so that's also nice. I'm Marie-Anne Lerjen. I'm a walking artist from Switzerland. I live in Zurich. And I started my walking art practice like officially in 2011. And my project's called Walking Agency for Walking Culture. And I will start the screen sharing. So I will first introduce a bit shortly what normally I'm doing, or which kind of walks that I'm doing, and then I will talk about the sweat mapping project. So when I started my walks, it's more or less always, there are more or less always group walks. So I invite people to come along, either in the context of a festival, of and all different kind of contexts. So they're mostly group walks where people can come along. And my aim is to think of the way we walk together. So how can we walk together in this special place, or on this special site, or in this context? So how can we walk together that we make a more intensive experience about the place, or the quality or characteristic of a place? And so I'm normally, when I prepare something, I go to the site and think of like a score that I introduce for the group, and then we do this thing together. So for example, I was once with a group of students in Italy. It was a huge riverbed from the river Tagliamento. So I had in this place, I thought of a score, how we will do the walk together. And this is the score that I gave. So walk slowly, but still head to the Adriatic Sea. So downriver, spread, but still be aware of the group. Don't talk. Take with you the words to meander. You have 30 minutes. And you see a bit what happened. So the group spread in this huge riverbed. And often these walks, I understand them as an experiment. So I don't know what the experience will be. And also the experience for every person that's in this will be also different. So that's why at the end of these walks, I give the people some moments to reflect on the experience, or make notes or sketch. And then also we exchange. So for me, it's a way of experiencing something together, everyone on his own, and then also sharing. Sometimes these group walks are also more about exchanging. So then we would also talk, or even a choreography of exchange could be. So I'm always from one walk to the next, because every walk comes out of the site or the context and has a bit of different concept. So I'm like developing a method of how in which all kind of ways we can do group walks together and experience a place more intensively. So I will just, the next walk I will do is in 10 days. I was invited to a place that is now a hotel, but it was a monastery and is now a cultural place also. And I will do a walk where we experience this feeling of being enclosed in a inside of walls. And I will now go to the sweat mapping project. It's a bit different than the like other walks I do. I started to get interested in sweat or sweating when I did a summer school workshop in Zurich at the art school. It was quite hot in that summer, 22. So always when we were outside, it was about performance. We started to sweat. At the end of the week, everyone presented something of this experience from the week, and I did a performance on heat and sweating, like. And when the Walking Art and Relational Geographies Conference opened their call, and they said that there will be a conference with 3 days in Girona and 2 days in Banyoles, and there will be a hiking day where we go from Girona to Banyoles. So I was interested to do a project on the walk. And that was, for me, because it was in July, took place in July, evident that there will be heat in Catalonia in summer. And then sweating while walking is, yeah, I wanted to work on that. So I prepared a glass in a frame, and beneath I sketched the river system between Girona and Banyoles. And I was quite some time looking for an instrument, how I could get the drops of sweat from the people on the walk. And then finally I found a small like pipette that was usable for that. So I brought this. And then during the walk, we started at 4 in the afternoon. I had with a lot of people a one-to-one conversation about like sweating and walking and sweating, and how it is for them and what the experience is. And then at the end of each conversation, I registered a short part, and I also asked each person for 1 drop of sweat that I brought onto the plate, following the water line between Girona and Banyoles. And from this sentences that people gave me, I made a small audio piece. I'll see if this works. You can hear it. Can you hear it? Okay.
Marcher dans la chaleur n'est pas une chose simple pour moi, mais comme j'aime marcher, je le fais quand même.
My sweat is tidal because I come from. I don't sweat much. Actually, the driest place on the driest continent.
Sweat makes me sticky. Sweat is a way you let go of certain aspects and cleanse the body.
Que es una cosa lenta, no sirve sudar un ratito y luego ducharse y ya está.
Dissolving.
Sino que hay que sudar unos cuantos días, 4 días, 5 días. Y ese sudor continuo es el que produce como una limpieza.
I found that there that the heat comes from deep within and a quick shower doesn't do it. You actually need a proper cool down.
A veces hago el doble del camino solamente para quedarme en la sombra y para no llegar empapadísima al lugar donde tengo que ir.
Without salt, Rosistad would not have existed. Without sweat, we would not be thinking beings or beings at all.
In Chinese medicine, we call it a benefit. We say it is a gift given to be able to sweat.
Een transpiratievocht.
Alors, quand je bois, j'ai l'impression que ça sort directement en sueur.
Sweating is a necessary but very unpleasant part of walking.
I hate the sweat chafing on the bridge of my nose.
O que eu gosto do suor são as manchas na rompa.
Caminar con calor porque me parece que es algo así como muy claro, ¿no? Muy directo, muy transparente. No engaña, no miente.
So what I noticed while doing this was not so easy to follow the group and stay in the group, and also doing all this registering and talking and also taking drops. So not so easy, but it was quite touching. All the interesting, also this way of approaching a conversation was really interesting. All this experience I heard. And then the next day, when we arrived in Banyoles in the evening, we could do like a short performative presentation of the outcome. And then also the plate, like the traces of the sweat on the plate were quite, the path we made almost invisible. Yeah, this is the website where you could see the project. And then perhaps how this developed, so this was in July, and I had a residency in October last year in a place in the east of Switzerland. It's hilly, and my topic went on like how it is to like the embodied perception of weather in general, so not just the heat, but the weather in general, how the weather changes, and how you change also, or your experience changes with the weather every day. So I went out almost every day on a special round, and I was really focused on the effects on the weather of your senses and how you sense the environment. And at the end of this residency, we had like an open studio where I did a group walk on this special highest point there, close to the place where we stayed. And this day was really amazing in that moment when the fog came really up and down for some meters on this point where we walked. So it was really amazing, this effect of feeling in the fog and then also out of the fog, how all the sense, the sensual perception changed a lot just in 1 second to the other. And then out of the whole stay, where I was also working with a library that was there in the place from an artist who also collected books on meteorology and weather, I prepared like a script for a weather walk it was like a walk. I would call the format a walking reading that I did in Zurich in December, where I read the script on a walk and the people could hear it with earplugs and just follow and take the things they hear together with the things. The route was also prepared in a way that it was interacting with the things that you heard. And then I was interested also to bring the same script about the weather to another place, another climate, another time of the year, and I could present it again in Psarades, where the conference took place this summer. And it was like the walking art encounters took place. And it was, for me, an interesting thing also to bring the experience, like the October autumn experience, to a place in summer, and also much more in the south than where I had the first experience. And I think I'm like interested in the weather or in the heat also because of the global environmental problems we face. And I think it's an interesting way also to how can we reflect on these things through also our bodily experience.
Yeah, great stuff. Loads of clapping hands and whatever we do. So well done there. Now, come on, let's have some questions or discussion points, or what do people think? I'm going to chip in and say that I didn't take part in the. I walked from Girona to Banyoles, but I made a damn sure I avoided Marie-Anne with a sweat frame. I had no idea it was going to be so multi-layered. So I thought you were just being mischievous, and also I thought it was interesting because when you fall into step with someone and you're walking beside them, you can share intimacies, but I never thought one would be able to share such an intimate thing as sweat. I thought I was really, I thought next you'd get this picking our nose or something, you know, like, oh no, I can't believe this is happening. So well done. You've proved to me that I'm a fool. I should have taken part. Anyway, there were people who did take part. Tamsin, you took part.
Yes, and I was really struck at the time of the, as you said, we were walking beside this river, but it was at the same time and a period of drought, and then you've talked about that a bit just now, and so it's lovely to hear that when you described how the little river of sweat on your paper just dried out by the time you got to Banyoles, and so that parallel is just so tangible. Fantastic.
Far away, Anne, no need to put your hand up, just jump in.
This was lovely, and I liked reliving both the walks that I was a part of, and something that struck me that I hadn't realized sort of being in it is one of the things that you do, and I wonder how conscious this is that you sort of use the body, you bring the body, they're very embodied experiences, but there's some way that the body is used to engage the mind. And there's this fusion, so asking questions like, what is sweat is both a very visceral question, but also a kind of intellectual question, or at least that's how I responded to it. And I felt with the weather walk too, there was very much of how you engage the mind without sort of saying, oh, we're going to engage the mind. And I didn't know how conscious, if that's something you think about when you develop these, because it's both looking again what you did and remembering what the experience was like.
Sorry, it was not so, the connection was not so good. So just like you said that how the embodied experience also connects a way of, or starts a process of thinking differently. Or,
yeah, that is like that's something that you're thinking about how body and mind connect in your projects, and how you sort of stimulate the mind through the body.
Mm. I think I'm not, it's often, I think what I want is really via a embodied thing. So if I think of a score, it's often how we walk, like backwards or in a line or whatever. And then I think this makes, or also if you have like a special topic or so. So we start, it gives you like, how do you say it? It's because you get more concentrated on it, or like your attention is going somewhere. And I think this can start something. And I will normally, I never want to like to influence in a way so that I know what you should think. So, but rather, how can I bring you to an experience? We'll start in a way, I don't know, whatever memories and thoughts, and then when we share, it's always interesting that, yeah, if you walk slowly somewhere and don't talk, then for somebody it's really became really sad because it remembered her to a funerals thing, and another person had a different experience and had other thoughts. And then when you exchange, it also enriches your experience, that you can hear about other people's thoughts and experience from the same like setting or frame or so. So yeah, but the embodied experience and the movement is important in that.
Yeah.
And I'm somehow convinced that it can also that it's a different quality in the thoughts you could get, or in where you could arrive in this way of thinking also.
Thanks. It was really nice to relive these both and to think. Yeah.
I'm kind of interested too, is how much pre-planning do you both do, or beforehand, and also, is there room for spontaneity? And because Marie-Anne, you're very honest, you say they're all experiments, but I have my suspicions you actually plan your experiments quite carefully. And also the sort of additional bit on that is, how much of it are you thinking about in terms of what the output will be or the documentation will be? I mean, how free are you? I mean, do you plan so much and then think, actually, I hadn't thought of that, on the go, and add something to it? Both of you, actually, how do you plan what you're doing, or do you not?
So I would say normally when I prepare something, so if I'm invited to a site or so, then it's important to go there and to because normally when I'm the site, and somehow I have an idea what could be interesting to do together. So I have this idea which score could be interesting to do on this place, and then sometimes it's already prepared when I know what the score will be, and then people come, and then we'll do it together, and then we see what the outcome is. But I think over all these years, it's like a method that's going from one project to the other, and it's often, or I don't know, I have this feeling when that when I got the score, that, or when I decide on the score, that normally I know that this could be interesting to do because of the experience I have, but not so much. There are other works where I also prepare content, but then it's more preparation. But often it's really what is just this score, and I always my aim is also to do it to change the least possible. So like have the score as minimal as possible, not very complicated.
Yes, me too. I try for simplicity because I have tried projects in the past which have been more complicated and people just don't. Everybody picks it up slightly differently, and then it ends up being really confusing. So I try to more and more do it very simple. In fact, when I did the last group walk for the equinox, somebody said, "So do we have to think about something while we're walking?" And I was like, "No, just basically what I've just told you. You know, you're walking. It's a day of 2 equal halves, and you're walking in pairs, and you're walking there, and you're walking back, and the rest is up to you. You know, because I want there to be space. I have done projects. I did do for the Urban Tree Festival one year. I did a project called Knock on Wood, and I actually made little hammers out of bits of piano keys. And I always do a recce, so I always know where we're going and yes, and whether there's, you know, whether it's all available and accessible and so on. And so I did give everybody their little keys, and I explained why, about how when people are choosing the wood to make a piano, then they literally knock on wood and listen to the sound and how differently the trees all sound. And so I said, you know, here's your hammer, and that's what we're doing. If you do want to record it, if you do want to sing along with the trees or whatever, you know, please feel free. And I find that I always have people on my walks who say, "Why don't we go here?" And I sort of have to just, you know, calm myself down and say, "Okay, why not?" That's fine, and just let it happen within reason if it's safe. But yeah, so I try to keep it very simple. And I mean, I learned so much from the response that people have. You know, the way that something is in my head is not the way it's necessarily heard and acted upon. And so I find it really fascinating to see what people do with instructions, or guidance or prompts. So I try to keep it simple.
Well, okay. Well, I want to say well done. I mean, you know, first of all, Tamsin, you won the award. And Marie-Anne, I think you were deserving honourable mention. And that's a reminder that I can say to each of you that, you know, you've still got to the 31st of October to get your walking piece in for this year's Marŝarto Award. Of course, the most important one is to say, please keep submitting work. It's free to enter the Marŝarto Award, and we'd love to have as many entries as possible. So we leave it there. And thanks very much for supporting us this evening.